People are like, doctors are bad at business. And I'm like, you'd be bad at business if you never tried it at all. You can learn how to run a really great business way faster than I can learn how to become a doctor. That's for damn sure.
This business is absolutely cyclical. You'll get a big check and you're like, holy shit, I'm rich. And then you're like, okay, buddy, well, that's going to have to last you 3 months because you may not get a check that's that big or that juicy for the next 2.
Big businesses, I can never get there. Big businesses are still a hot mess. It's just a lot of people doing a bunch of shitty manual work.
My fiance Courtney, we did an episode, we dubbed it to Spanish, and I got multiple texts. Like, your girl speaks amazing Spanish. She speaks no Spanish whatsoever.
Two vascular surgeons walk into a bar and come out with a podcast. We are talking everything vascular and not. Welcome to the Life of Flow podcast.
Work isn't your life, but it is part of it. With locum tenens, there's a way to never work weekends or to only work half of the year. You could have a job on the coast with fewer hours and more pay, or work just down the road and have a beautiful work-life balance. Create the life you want with locum tenens. Explore your options at locumstory.com. No commitments, no recruiters, just resources.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Life of Flow podcast. And Miguel is back, ladies and gentlemen. He did not go away.
Back.
So
Popular
today,
demand.
by popular demand. And today we have Preston Alexander. Preston is the founder of /Health, which is a firm that helps physicians in independent practice manage their finances and get some insight. FSH. So hope you guys enjoyed. This was a really good one. Vamos. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Life of Flow podcast. We have returning champ Miguel and we have Preston Alexander, who has been so gracious to give us some of his time. And he has a super interesting story. I think I discovered Preston in Substack, and his Substack is pretty interesting. And I learned a lot. So, Preston, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be on with both of you.
Thanks, man. I just a super quick house cleaning items I wanted to say, because I've had this from multiple people, is like, we thought Lucas cut you out of the show. That's literally what they said, because what people forget is that we do batch recording, but they don't know that. And so you just said Miguel's going to be unavailable on like the first recording, but then all the other ones, you didn't say it because you had already said it in the morning. But the people that showed, they're like, he just totally like ignored this dude. So anyway, I'm back hey, look at that.
Wait.
I'm back. I don't know how I did that. I don't know. It's my producers. I have an executive team of producers here next to me. Anyway, back by popular demand. I'm in the show again. Thank you very much, Lucas, for allowing me back into your beautiful show. It's amazing. And then the other thing that I think is super fun is that everybody texted me yesterday saying, WTF is happening with your accent, Miguel. And it's because we recorded the show in Spanish and we dubbed it with AI, and it gave me like this Indian, Western, Hispanic, like a weird like accent. And some of the people, like, honestly, I was like surprised that some of the people didn't even understand. Like, he's like, dude, like, why do you speak like weirdo when you speak on the show? I was like, bro, you don't think that I was actually that. So anyway, we dubbed shows, guys. Yeah. So if our guest prefers to speak in Spanish, we're going to speak Spanish to him, and then we dub it with the AI. So you'll just get a very weird side of us. But it's not a perfect. It's not.
You ever dub it the other way? I would love to hear what my weird AI.
We do.
All
episodes get dubbed to Spanish. Yeah.
You would be surprised. It's actually way better the other way around. Way better.
Yeah. I got 2 notes on your notes. First of all, if we have any people that are experts in calendar management, Miguel needs some help with that. and the other thing is, like, we dubbed, so my fiance Courtney, we did an episode, we dubbed it to Spanish, and I got multiple texts. It's like, bro, because I'm a native Spanish speaker, Miguel's too. Bro, like, life goals. Like, your girl like speaks amazing Spanish. And I was like, she speaks no Spanish whatsoever.
I'm excited about that. I've always wanted to speak a different language, and I've always dabbled in a few, and Spanish has always been at the top of the list for obvious reasons, and just never got there. Duolingo just didn't quite cut it. And so I'm excited to hear what I would sound like otherwise if I had committed to the mission.
I have no doubt, Preston, that we're within probably 2 to 3 years of having immediate translation to any language you want, like
You you
seamless,
you have it already in
perfect.
your
Yeah, but it's still glitchy. It's still
yeah.
glitchy. I have a nurse that only speaks English, and most of my staff speak Spanish,
Yeah.
and she likes to put it on that mode, and she has no idea what's going on. Like, because it's it's a lot of
Yeah.
conversations and bantering, and then sometimes slang in the middle, and it makes it really hard for her to follow. So, but I think that's just a matter of time, in our capacity to be able to deal. If we're doing business with a Chinese citizen, if we're doing business with somebody in Brazil, it's a matter of time that you can get on a Zoom call and absolutely have no problem whatsoever to that. But anyway, getting back on track here, Preston. I am super intrigued by your path. And Lucas and I say this constantly, which is we invite people in a very self-serving way because we think that we can extract free advice from
Free
you.
consulting advice.
And I shit you not, but I have had this discussion within the last 2 months that we need to hire a fractional chief financial officer. And so I have a private practice that I've been building for a few years now, and we're at the point where a lot of these headaches that I think you have noted become an issue. And so this is something that I had been thinking of. And then when I saw your name and I saw your bio, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to get some free advice tomorrow. Possibly I'm going to get my fractional CFO. But anyway, I guess that to set the stage, I'd love to know maybe a high level view of just your journey. What'd you do? What'd you educate yourself on? What was your experience professionally? And then how you landed to thinking today that you can be an authority in a guide for us physicians in the sense of managing the finances of our complex private practices.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to be succinct with the pathway and the overview, so as not to take up the entire 45 minutes to an hour. I got my start in healthcare just over 10 years ago after graduating from graduate school with an MBA. I was like shocked on applying to a bunch of jobs. It was 2015, and I was like, okay, time to get into real work. I'd done a bunch of other stuff before that and went back to school after some failed business attempts, and found myself in a global medical device company in product management. And so this was the first foray into healthcare. And I just thought it was fascinating. From a business perspective, medical devices are super interesting. Working with hospitals, I just kind of loved it, loved the industry. And after a couple of years, just realized that I had a very narrow viewpoint of healthcare because, again, I didn't go to school for it. I didn't, wake up in the morning when I was 7 and be like, I want to be in healthcare, that kind of a thing. And so after being in a couple different companies, I thought to myself, I need to learn this. I really love healthcare, but I want to learn more about it and what's going on. What are the issues? What are the intricacies of the industry? So I really decided to go on this kind of self-learning journey outside of the work that I did in med device. Because, product management is product management. It's fun. It's cool. Plus we get to really actually help people. We made life-saving devices. We did really cool stuff. But I was like, there's some piece of this. I'm just looking at this really myopic view. So I went over to LinkedIn because in my view, there's sort of 3 things one can be certain of: death, taxes, and then if you say anything on the internet, someone will tell you why you're wrong. And that's what I really wanted out of it, though, because I knew that I didn't know anything about healthcare. Even though I was in product management, med device, worked at hospitals, talked to clinicians, I was like, I don't know shit. Um, so I would kind of do like little book reports on articles I found about healthcare. And inevitably someone would be like, this is dumb, or this is wrong, or what about this, or what about that? And then I would just start a dialogue. I'd say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Can I jump on a call? Can you explain that to me more? What am I missing? How can I understand this better? And I used LinkedIn like that for 5 years. I didn't really sort of say anything. I said stuff, but only as a means to get someone to explain to me what was going on. And through that whole sort of doing that, I did some other things. I started a medical device company We had an exit and sold it. We got into digital health with a co-founder. We set up, digital health practices, which effectively are similar to a brick and mortar, but we did it virtually. And then during that time, also just started writing more and more because these ideas and what I learned from people, and I was like, oh man, healthcare is so complicated and there's so much complexity like in the iceberg that's under the water, and we don't talk about it enough. And I didn't think people necessarily knew about it enough. Like, I don't want to ever assume people just don't know things, but it seemed to me that there was this whole, I was learning things for the first time. And so I wanted more people to know about it, know about the mechanics, the private equity, vertical integration, what float means in insurance companies, why it's so much harder in private practice now than it ever has before, why consolidation's happening, and really understanding these, macro and micro financial impacts on healthcare overall. And so that was this like sort of messy multi-pivot journey, which eventually has now led to I have a co-founder. We run /health together, which has become a financial management platform for by and large private independent practices, to help solve some of those issues because it's so challenging to see the numbers in a really meaningful, accurate way to then manage around. And then she's an attorney, and I help support a law firm, and we work exclusively in healthcare, digital health startups, medical device, private independent physician practices, things like that. So that's sort of the sort of high-ish level, messy overview of my pivoty journey.
Where are you based out of?
I'm in Atlanta.
Italy.
Atlanta.
No, Atlanta.
Atlanta. Oh, you're in Atlanta. And is that also?
I wish.
Is that?
Wish I
Hey,
was in Italy.
listen,
Yeah,
it's
life goals.
a matter of organization. What about the lawyer? Where is she at? Also Atlanta.
She's in South Dakota,
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
But we do transactional work and contract work, so we can work kind of anywhere. Doesn't matter where clients are.
So how did you two meet?
On LinkedIn. So the multiple degrees of separation. So I had a friend who started a healthcare community, like a Slack channel, whatever. And I was like, oh, she's cool. She knows a lot. Let me just join it. It's $20 a month. I met this other guy, and we got along, talked regularly. He eventually started another healthcare community on Slack that was like free. That first one sort of fizzled out. I was there. And when I was starting this digital health company, it was in wound care. And I thought to myself, okay, what do I need and like what's expensive? And like what I needed was a physician and a wound care nurse. And what's expensive is lawyers. And so I thought, let me put that founding team together. So I was searching for an attorney to be a co-founder in this company. She was looking for clients for her law firm at the time, that she worked for, a large top 50 law firm. And we met, and I was like, oh, you're cool. Maybe come actually just work on this project. And she wanted to. And so we started working together. It's been about 3 years. And then again, we wound that down. We started consulting, and then /health turned into what it is now, SaaS platform. And then, as one does when you're starting a company, you either work full time or you start like sort of a separate side hustle. So her side hustle of taking on a few clients.
Yeah. What was the pain point that you saw that told you, okay, /health is something that I get to do?
Yeah. So we had built this sort of practice for ourselves in a way. And like we said, we had a physician and a nurse we were working with. And when it wasn't working, the area that we were focused in, wound care, which I'm sure you guys are both very familiar with, and some of the challenges sort of around it. I was just out and about, sort of had some connections, had some folks, and knew a couple docs who were like, we're starting these practices, but we have no idea what to do. And I was like, oh, we know what to do. Do you want our help? And they were like, yes, please. Thank you. And so we started launching practices, and we've launched several now, helped doctors launch their own independent practices. And then, we were also kind of, all right, what else is there in that space that we can help with? And we did a lot of different services, and then finally whittled down, and just the most of the demand was around revenue cycle management. And then my co-founder, she too had, her name's Sarah Covington. And before becoming an attorney, she was a executive at a couple different hospitals in revenue cycle management. So she knew it super well. We built a team. We have a group primarily out of India that does a lot of the, work. And so we were providing revenue cycle to some of these startup practices, but also some existing practices. And it was really through that and understanding the complexity and the challenges around revenue cycle. Plus, sat on the business side trying to start these practices. We looked at their finances, we did their projections, we built their pro formas, all this stuff. And we talked to a lot of different groups. And what we found is this big revenue cycle is its own pain point that exists in a million different places to try to just get paid in the first place. But then the next pain point we identified that led to this platform we built was this big disconnect. Revenue cycle lives here, expenses and financial management live here. A lot of folks at the end of the month, they get like their expense report and then their collections. And like that's it. And there's two numbers. One number is here, one number is there. They don't like marry very easily. So we wanted to build something that would let them marry together. And so instead of say, today is May 1st, we closed out, April's rev cycle, all the payments are posted, right? You get your posted payments and it's, however much money. And then you're also like, well, how much did I pay in bills this month? And you're like, hopefully it's a positive number when I subtract the two. We're like, we need something better than that. So what we've done is we connected the two kind of systems that were separate. And we say, okay, if you see a patient today, we know based on historical payments by clinician, place of service, payer, CPT code, modifier, what your payment is most likely to be. So we call that, that's the revenue number as opposed to cash coming in. We say, that's the revenue for this activity you did today. And here are all the expenses, and we're going to allocate expenses to those revenue dollars and those interactions. So you see a much more granular view of the finances in real time versus just waiting till the end of the month. And you can see profitability by CPT code, by clinician, by payer, by commercial insurance, by all these different avenues and views. So then you can start making decisions versus saying, I think we just need to collect more money. I think we just need to lower expenses. And it's not very strategic, but it's hard to be when you just have two big chunk categories. So that was the pain point that led us to building this platform out.
So from a practical standpoint, I may be jaded by my own journey here, but I believe that what's led us to run a very efficient show here is that we've hired very smartly. We've not been, we've spent money, we've invested money in hiring really good people and people that have experience in this, and having a core team of people that are local, because these conversations are on a daily basis, right? A denial that came through, appeal process that came through, a doc to doc that needs to happen, a pre-authorization that the number and the codes don't add up with the surgical plan that I have. And so I've realized my intimate involvement with my on-site RCM team has led us to, I feel, have a very successful venture. And I would feel super uncomfortable if today you tell me that I'm going to get into a SaaS contract with an external provider that's just going to say, you know what, you can fire 3 people and we're going to take over all this. And we're going to be, you're going to have a couple of people out in New Delhi that are going to be managing all this smarter and faster than you can with your own team. And so what would be your response to that?
I mean, first I would say if it's working well for you, don't change anything. I would also say that what we do isn't that. And our platform's not a revenue cycle platform. It doesn't replace anyone's job. It just gives more financial intelligence and insight into what's already happening in the practice. So we don't do like denial tracking. There's no like prior auth management. It's just a financial management platform so that you could say, okay, of all these ablations I did on United Healthcare patients last month, am I making money or losing money on them? If I'm losing money on them, let me drill down and see why. what are the cost drivers? Is this an efficiency issue? Is this a payer contract issue? Is this a place of service issue? Should I invest in the OBL? Should I do, those different kinds of questions? It gives you the data you need to know to ask them and then to answer them. Um, but your concern is also valid, and I'm sure you get only one cold text or email a day about revenue cycle services or outsourcing this or that, constant, right? And so, yeah, I think for that is like, we're set up that way, but it just depends. Like sometimes it is better when the team is on site. Sometimes it's fine when it's remote. Sometimes tech stack works better for people. Sometimes just having a lot of people works better for people. And I think that it just is a unique situation and comes down certainly to competency, but more than that, to leadership style, to team dynamics, to how you want your organization to function. And so, like, if I were pitching, which I wouldn't do, but if I were pitching you revenue cycle services and you were like, "Oh yeah, well we have this team here and we're tight knit and we're close and we talk constantly," and I would say, "Well, if it's working, then I don't want to sell you anything because I don't sell things to people who don't need it." Um, but if you were kind of interested in what could be different, I would start more from a cultural and organizational level to say, how could we build this out so that you feel like we're an extension of your team, not that they're replacing anybody. You guys communicate a lot. How do we set up communication channels so that you can real time communicate with us? How do we sort of emulate and integrate with your current dynamics at work? So yeah, I wouldn't respond to you with any sort of pushback. I'd say that's amazing. And yeah, our SaaS platform is about financial management, not about replacing people.
It almost sounds to me like then just clarifying, it's not that you're offering an all in, but this could be something that could be inserted in a very personalized fashion. And if you have a high functioning team that's doing things well, the piece I would be interested in would be the software tool that would allow my team to speak a more intelligent language when it comes to numbers, right? Projections, have a Power BI. I don't know how you manage it, but have graphics. Where are we at? Where are we coming in? Where are we going to be having deficit? I'll tell you, this business is absolutely cyclical. There are times when everybody wants to get operated. There are times when nobody wants to get operated. And so this business of healthcare is very ups and downs. And that throws a wrench in cash flow, because all of a sudden you'll get a big check and you're like, holy shit, I'm rich. And then you're like, okay, buddy, well, that's going to have to last you 3 months because you may not get a check that's that big or that juicy for the next 2. Or, small entities, private independent practices, we are so exposed to issues in payment and electronic funds management that the moment that there's a big system hack, like it happened, what was it, 2 years ago, and the whole system collapsed, then we didn't get money for almost 2 months. And so I find it incredibly useful that there's potential tools that could add visibility to the future, because cash flow is really one of probably the hardest things you do. Because if it's a physician, I'll tell you what we have is we have a line of credit with a bank, right? And so then what do you put in the line of credit, right? Is it only capital equipment, capital expenses? Can you allocate potentially some overhead? It becomes very, very confusing to sometimes allocate those resources. And certainly the more complex your institution becomes, the more complex those problems can be. But at the same time, if I'm hearing right, at the beginning, if you're a guy out there, you're listening to this pod and you're like, fuck, I'm over the hospital, I want to start from zero. You're going to go out and you're going to be in big zeros for a few months. And maybe you don't want to hire the expensive team that we currently have as an RCM that's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, almost 5 members right now. That's a big chunk of salary every month that maybe somebody that's about to start couldn't take on, and you could provide that. Is that a good description of how you can maybe accommodate to different stage practices?
Yeah, and I mean, what we and there's all manner of different solutions. Like again, we cut our teeth and started in like the consulting business. So anything that we cut and the platform itself is sort of our focus. We do some RCM. I call us a reluctant revenue cycle company. We do it if it like makes all the sense and someone's like, no, please do this for us. And we're like, okay, we will because we have the infrastructure. Um, and so, yeah, I think outsourcing can make sense. A lot of folks have minimums, RCM teams, which can also be burdensome. Like there's so many components that are important to look at. Like, we were helping a private independent practice, a primary care, family medicine, but they were concierge. And so I'm like, you don't really have to worry about your cash flow very much because your membership fees are going to like really take care of you. You don't need don't outsource your RCM. Don't use, Athena's highest level RCM, whatever, denials management. Like just pay the least amount and you have an office manager as a, husband wife team. And y'all have enough time. Just sort of sort out the mechanics of billing through your EMR and like you'll be fine because it's pretty straightforward. Now, a vascular practice, very different, very not straightforward, much harder, a lot of rules. So it just depends on a lot of factors on how you want to approach it. But yeah, I mean, you can outsource and then eventually insource. You can, if sometimes people just get sort of like a fractional coder and like they'll kind of manage the follow ups. It just depends on your ramp, how big of a practice you get, how much your rent is. Like there's a lot of factors. And again, that's the important piece of saying we can't just look at revenue cycle here and finances here. We have to look at them as one unified viewpoint because it's all about the finances. And your point about cash flow is super important too, because when we talk about that, we have cash forecasting that we built into our tool, and it's a custom tool too. It's not a Power BI report. It's like bespoke software that we built. And so you look at 13-week cash flows because, like you said, you might get a big check and you're like, awesome, right? But the problem is that check, yes, surgical seasonality, but also it could have been payments from services you provided 4 months ago, 5 months ago. You know, 3 OBL cases that insurance is just locked up because like they're a-holes about it and they don't want to pay you. You finally wrested the money from their cold dead fingers. And then you're like, sweet. And I'm like, don't do anything because that money was from 4 months ago. This is not like this is a cash flow management and it's hard. And we look at AR and all these different factors. But like that's why it's important, in my view, to look at practices from an accrual accounting method where you're saying like that cash came in this month, awesome. But like that's not my revenue right now. Like I need to look at my P&L like today and what my expenses and revenue are today, not like rely on something that may or may not come through from 5 months ago. And then again, you're like, oh, cool, it came through. But like based on your activities today, like the next month isn't necessarily going to look like that, right? So you might get overextended and say, oh, we've been waiting to hire this PA. I got this check. Let's go hire this PA. And then in 2 weeks, you're in a cash crunch and you're like, shit, I got to draw my line of credit. I didn't realize I have to. Now I got to cover working capital for 3 months. And now I have interest payments. Like, crap. And it's because it's so hard to get into the guts of how the money is moving through the system because timing's hard because of all those rules. And really it's insurance company's fault. Like, let's be real.
Where do people leak money the most? Where based on that disjunction between uh, finances and capital allocation, where are most people leaking money and they're not aware that they're leaking money?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big area, I mean, underpayments is always an issue. Because you find those in drips and drabs. They're not necessarily like a humongous, like you're not going to see like magically find like 200K in a year. I mean, a bigger practice might, and I mean that's super meaningful money. But like a lot of independent one or two docs, like it's not going to be this like windfall. It's always important to keep track of. Contract rates are a big one because I mean the amount of practices that I've talked to, I'm like, how are your contract rates? They're like, I don't, huh? And I'm like, where are your contracts? Go get all of your contracts. Cause like, when's the last time you negotiated? I don't know. When we opened. When did you open? 13 years ago. It's like, okay. That's like, some of the basic kind of things but But it's so hard to do because, like, one, do you know you can negotiate? Who do you call to negotiate with? Like, what do you ask for? What's the process? When do you have time to do that? Because, like, you've been in surgical cases all day, and then you have notes to catch up on, and you're 780 notes behind, and, like, when are you supposed to do this? And, like, I can't hire like, my people I hired are, like, yelling about prior auths all the like, the complex has made it very hard to do these things, and I don't none of that's lost on me. So, like, and it's really easy to say, "Go do this, and go do this, and go do," but it's not easy to actually do those things. Um, but those are 2 areas. And then, yeah, having a good revenue cycle team in place who can get bills out of the door quickly. That's partially the responsibility of the clinical team. Obviously, you gotta close encounters and close notes and, your coders gotta be on it, whomever, because the faster you bill out, the faster you get paid, but also the more likely you are to get paid in the first place. So there's 2 parts to that. Obviously, you want the cash flow, but payers are more likely to pay you the full amount the faster the bill gets, uh, processed and in their system. So that's a huge one is just speed. And then, of course, there's things, accuracy, coding properly, following the rules, getting the prior authorizations, building those systems that just make it sort of, not easy, but automatic to get things out the door the right way, to triage what's more complicated that we need to review to make sure it's coded properly. What's the 80% that's easy that we know is gonna and, like, just get those out the door. You know what I mean? So I think process is where people end up kind of letting money just sort of slide out the door.
I think one thing important, Preston, for our audience out there is explaining um, some of these terms. As an outsider, I grew up in Costa Rica, and so as an outsider, one of the things that I've always criticized jokingly about Americans is that you guys just love acronyms. Everybody loves acronyms because somehow there's a status that comes when you know the acronyms. It almost is like, well, that guy knows his shit, right? So if I say, well, I've got an RCM team that focuses on AP and AR, and then all of a sudden anybody from anywhere in the world is going to be like, what the fuck did you just say? And funny enough, I've I've realized this through my own journey. I don't know. And then my colleagues have no idea of what that all means. So I think let's just let's start by talking about what AR means, and then why is it that we report it in like tranches, right? Like 30, 60, 90. What does that mean? Because I bet you that a lot of us on that call driving are being like, yeah, fuck, what does that mean? Because they hear it from their business people, but half of the time we have no idea what that means and how it impacts us, and it's very important. So let's, if you don't mind, let's dial into that.
Totally. So AR stands for accounts receivable. The flip of that is AP, which stands for accounts payable. So accounts payable is your expense side. It's the money you owe. So like you put it on a credit card, no money moved yet. So it's an accounts payable. Or you have, you get an invoice, right? You bought, I don't know, supplies or drugs or whatever, and you get an invoice, you're gonna have to pay it. So accounts payable, you record it somewhere in that bucket because you're eventually gonna have to pay it. Same thing is true in accounts receivable, only it's money that you're owed. And so it's such a big deal in RCM, which stands for revenue cycle management. So in or medical billing, like we can just call it billing. Um, it's such a big deal in billing because, like, that's how you measure, 1, your cash flow, so, like, when's money going to come in the door? And 2, you measure your efficiency, so, like, are we doing a good job in our, revenue cycle management? It really is more managing the whole revenue cycle. And so there's benchmarks out there, right? You want your accounts receivable to be under 30 days, and that means that on average, it takes 30 days for you to collect your money. So, sometimes you get paid in 2 weeks, sometimes you get paid in 90 days, sometimes 180. And to your point, Miguel, that was like what we look at in these chunks. So we look at 0 to 30 days. That means that I sent the bill, I billed insurance, like my charges are out the door. I send it to the insurance company. If if I saw a patient that day, same day, that's ideal, right? Then I'm in zero, day 0 of accounts receivable. If it takes me 35 days to send it out the door, then I'm automatically in the 30-day to 60-day bucket. Or if I send it out on day 2 and it takes them, and they still haven't paid 45 days later, that account receivable, that $786 that they owe you, is in the 30 to 60-day bucket. And you can think about it like a chart. Like we think about it like a grid and diagonally. Like, so if you start, like if you're a brand new practice, it's really easy to see, right? Your charges in, 0 to 30 in the first sort of month are, I don't know, call it $500,000. And then your goal is to get is for as little money as possible to be in the next, like, down and over one in the diagonal sense. So the little money is possible to be in the 30 to 60-day bucket. And then even less money and less money. Because, like, if it's taking 120 days to get paid, that's a cash flow problem. That's a huge problem. And that's why we monitor those numbers so incessantly and critically. It's because, like you were saying, I mean, do I need to take a line of credit out? Do I have money to pay my people? Can I buy the supplies that I need? Like, can't see a patient if I don't have hand sanitizer. I need to buy stuff. I got to pay my bills. Rent's due. And if it's taking them 20 days to pay you, that puts you in a bad position from a cash perspective. So that's accounts receivable and why we're fanatical about it.
Miguel, how was your journey on learning all this stuff? Because how much did you know when you left academia? And, like, tell me like a funny story of you figuring something out in a painful way.
Oh, there's so many. So how did I learn this? I learned it the painful way, man, the hard way. And how much did I know when I came out of my academic practice in the big hospitals? Absolutely nothing. Even though I would go to the meetings and I would listen to this and I would see everybody nodding, I bet you that probably 90% of the dudes in that room had no idea what the admin people were telling them. That's what a lot of times, I've said this before, has led to us losing control, because we have essentially been fed this bullshit idea that we're so smart that we shouldn't be paying attention to all this other stuff. Like, let us do the business. You guys just go operate because you're so smart. You shouldn't be distracted. Well, that's when we lost the battle and we became cogs and we became, just as you say it, Lucas, you said it best, is we're not an asset, we're a liability. But back to the story, it was really just through incredibly painful moments, man. And realizing that I was doing a ton of cases and I'm like, well, where's the money? Like, I'm doing all these cases. I should be seeing all this money, but I'm not seeing it. And so having to sit through all these meetings, and the great thing about being the boss is that I can ask questions like I'm a 6-year-old. I was like, whoa. What does that mean? Right? Like, well, okay. And how are we going to get, oh, got it. Okay. So then, okay, got it. And so it was just about understanding each of the components, breaking them down to as easy language as, and quite frankly, it's all relatively easy. You are not doing complicated mathematical equations here where you need to know what the relativity theory is. No, it's like literally just balancing a sheet, is understanding the strategy behind it and understanding how your AR has to behave. And then it almost becomes like a measure of your efficiencies, right? And so if all of a sudden, for example, I'm looking at my ARs and then all of a sudden my 90 days starts blowing up, meaning that there's a lot of money out there that I'm not collecting, right? Because the money sits in accounts receivable as long as it's not collected. The moment that you collect a bill, then it moves away from the AR. Now it's not money they owe you, it's money they already gave you, so you clean it. So when you see these amounts going up, you start realizing that there's something choking the system, right? And so I've realized a couple of things. It's either maybe staff that was just not good. You identify people that are just not doing a good job at doing their job at following up. The first thing I'll give you just one example. You get a pre-authorization from Cigna to do a procedure, and then they authorize you, and I come and I do the procedure, and I close my note and I send that claim out that first day. First is it goes into some bucket for a few days. Then you're going to get a notification which a lot of times, check this out, they send it by fucking snail mail. That is, hey, we actually need you to send us the op note, and we need you to send us some other additional information. We want a month of like notes. So my team has to gather all that and send it. We pre-auth, like they already said yes. They still want all this information. And then they're going to come back and they're going to say, all right, we're going to pay you this 2 codes because this one we don't see the need. And so then I have to go back and fight them for them to pay me that other code. And then that creates all these delays. So if you don't have a team that's really pushing that ball past the finish line, you fall on it. And then the other thing is, which has happened to us too, is we're getting super busy and we're not adding people. So then I'm just making the same people do, twice or thrice the work, which creates then of these. So when I start looking, I'm like, hey, what have you done? What have you done? I just haven't had time. Like I haven't had a minute in the day to get back to that. And it becomes an issue when you're thinking as a private practice that you want to exit, that you want to create some valuation. First thing anybody is going to say is like, show me your AR management. They want to know how diligent you are at managing those funds. And then the AP, I'm going to let you explain what AP is. And then I'm going to tell you my painful story with AP. That was kind of funny, but not funny. But that's another part of it, because it's all the money you owe all your industry people that are giving you these devices. And you're like, oh my God, I'm getting a really good deal on this particular stent or atherectomy device or balloon. And I mean, when you're busy and you're doing a ton of cases and you look at all of a sudden, I paid this company $200,000 in bills in a year, you realize that you're dealing with a very expensive practice, right? And how these people should really treat you like freaking like royalty. But anyway, what's AP and why? What about it is really important in your opinion?
Yeah. So just real quick though, before that, because I think like the points that you made are super important, and say this a lot. Like it drives me up the wall. Like I just makes me so freaking mad. People are like, doctors are bad at business, and I'm like, first of all, you'd be bad at business if you never tried it at all or like did what like that's just unfair, because you're just like saying like a person who's never, it's like saying to, I don't know, someone who's never ridden a bike is like, that person sucks at riding a bike. Like, well, yeah. So it really pisses me off because, and again, these are things you can learn and skills you can get good at. Like, you can learn how to run a really great business way faster and to a higher degree than I can learn how to become a doctor. That's for damn sure. So anyways, I don't need to get rolling on how much it frustrates me when people say that, because it's all very learnable. And you're right, it's not like that complicated. Like, you provide a service, someone pays for the service, you got to manage the in between, the efficiencies, the different things. Like, healthcare is complicated in other ways, but like at the end of the day, it's like provide value, get paid for it. I mean, like, you can run a business. Anybody, it's possible. Anyways, not the point. It's important though. Accounts payable. So yeah, AP is accounts payable. So again, like you said, it's the money you owe, and it's super important. I dealt with this when I was in med device. I started a med device company, and we talk about working capital a lot. And you got to look at like cash conversion cycles and working capital things. It's basically like how the time between the money you spend to eventually make money. So it's like that's the working capital piece. Like, you have to have capital money that you can put to work to then realize the return on that working capital. So like in devices, I have to go build inventory. So I have to pay $1 million to build X amount of devices. And then I go sell the devices. And so between the time that I like get the money in and I've made the thing, like that's my working capital or cash conversion sort of cycle. That's how you can think about it. It's like I have to spend money to eventually make it. So it works the same way in private practice. And the pain point you're describing is because, okay, you do a case and there's a stent that you bought, uh, from whatever medical device company. And they're like, "Ooh, Miguel, you ordered 25 stents from us. Here's your invoice for it. And you owe it, and but we're so nice. We're going to give you net 30-day term, which means you don't owe them any money for 30 days. That's the net 30. You pay us in 15, we'll give you a 2% discount, but no one ever does that. But whatever. Net 30, congratulations. And you're like, oh, great. I don't have to pay for 30 days. Perfect. Right. But you don't do, 25 cases day one, right? First of all. And second of all, you also don't get reimbursed for the cases you done until 30 days, 40 days, however many days later. So if you're not diligent about that AR, you're paying all of this money up front, even though if you have some terms in your accounts payable, um, and you're not going to have the cash come back to you. So you're going to have to figure out how to float or invest in the work or have enough working capital to support those expenses until you actually get paid for it. So that's like a huge interaction point between looking at account, and not every practice has that, because a lot of practices like they have, family medicine, different thing, like lower overhead, right? I mean, it's just people. They're not buying goods and things like that. But if you're buying devices, if you're buying those kind of things, like it becomes a huge part of what you need to do from an inventory management perspective, from a, what are my terms? Can I get net 60-day terms? If I'm spending, $387,000 with you a year, and I'm a great surgeon and I'm a KOL and I'm doing all this stuff, and like I want net 60, or even better, I'll pay you when I get reimbursed.
I would even say go higher. So if you're out there starting to negotiate your contracts, start as high as you can. Say, I'm not going to sign this deal unless you give me 60. But most people, if you know the right person and you flex the right way, they'll give you even 90. So most of so of course the idea is that the longest you can push it down, it creates the best buffer for all the other stuff to catch up. And still there's going to be a lag from a practical standpoint. But AP is really important because you don't realize how many vendors you ultimately end up working with, from maintenance guys to McKesson, which is just the simple stuff like a 22 gauge syringe, to a gauze, to the guy that brings the laundry, to the disposable clothing, to then add all the big ones, right? Cook, Boston, Abbott, da, da, da. All of a sudden you have about 20 or 30 vendors that in a way are working with you, each one of which has a different system by which you need to understand how to keep a clear vision to their accounts payable, right? So Abbott's going to have their proprietary Abbott system. You have to have a username and so on and so forth. If you don't have a username, they send it through snail mail. Yes. And guess what? Sometimes they have the wrong address. And so on the pain points that I had at the beginning was because when you start a company, you ask people to wear 1,000 hats. And it's almost like, you know what, if you're part of my ground zero team, I really feel sorry for you because probably you left or I made you leave for really unfair reasons. And so if there's anybody out there that listens to this, I'm very sorry that I put you through that, but there was inevitably no other way to do it. And so then what happens is you start realizing when things blow up, but you realize it a little bit late when they're like, oh, I need a 100 stent. We don't have it. Why the fuck? I told you last week we didn't have one. Well, you're on a credit hold. I was like, why am I on a credit hold? I've paid every single thing. And it was because there was a wrong address. We didn't have access to the system and the bills were going to some other building, like absolutely unbeknownst to me. And it wasn't that we didn't even have the money. Like we had money, we could have paid it. We just didn't know that we owed that money. And so the complexities of keeping that. So then we had, how do you refurbish? You have an AP person, you add an email. The email has to be the centralized system. Every account you have to go and then add those. And then you have to clean all of your accounting. Because if you have good accountants, they're going to tell you that you're going to end up in jail if you keep this shit messy thing going on where none of the things are adding up. And then if you think having an American Express card works, because it does, and there's great perks to having it, and some vendors will let you pay with American Express, not all of them, but some will, you should always try that because it creates points and you have valuation, in other words. But then you have to make sure, you have to make sure that Amex then, talks to the, AP person to make sure that that invoice got paid and that when it comes back to the accountants, everything kind of comes together. So it's really a pain in the ass. And so, Preston, all I can say is if you guys have a way to figure that out for people that are starting, I think that you're onto something incredibly powerful. I really do.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to tell you like a story though, because I think that in startups, everyone's like, startups are super messy. True. Across the board. Any business you start, it's like messy. And you're like, oh shit, there's so many things to do. And how do I do all this stuff? And I like my taxes and my business licenses and my permits and my accounts payable and 18 emails. And I don't know how to set this up. And Microsoft is the biggest pain in the ass. And but the list is infinite. Um, so I worked at a global medical device company. Globally, I don't know, 300 and something million for this division. The business is like a $16 billion global company. Our US based did probably $200 million in revenue a year. Big business, right? We had a large health system, one of the largest in the country, that we put on credit hold, which was something that one did not do to this health system. Is in the Northeast, if that helps with any context. Um, and we put them on credit hold because they owed us like $2.5 million from like unpaid invoices. And we're calling and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. We're like, what do you mean? We sold you all this stuff. Like we have a record, blah, 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 blah. Well, we faxed them the invoices and the invoices, like 7 of them were just like in a pile somewhere that someone finally found eventually. And the point of the story is like, and this is a lot of people are like, I can't do this, right? Because I want to compare my chapter 1 to your chapter 30 or whatever. Like big businesses, I can never get there. I'm like, big businesses are still a hot mess with a lot of people. And that's the difference. They can hire a lot of people, but it's just like a lot of people doing a bunch of shitty manual work. And like AI, blah, 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 whatever, maybe one day. But we're still faxing things, we're still mailing things. It still takes like a person to go into the email and make sure and do this and enter the spreadsheet number. Like, don't, it's dissuading, but don't be dissuaded because I guarantee you that every large company that, like you mentioned, Zimmer and Abbott and, Stryker and they just have teams of people to do this shitty manual work. That's a huge pain in the ass. And so like, don't be scared of it because even the big companies have to deal with it.
So, Preston, if I had to say I'm listening in and I'm like burnt out at the hospital and I think that I want to get out and I think that I want to start a private practice, and I don't necessarily have a ton of dry powder, but I have some, and maybe I can go to the bank and get a little line of credit to get things operational. Could you come up with what you would say is the ideal startup team, whether it's people that you have to hire and just eat it, or whether it's services that you can outsource from a business standpoint, like ignore clinical operations, nurse practitioners, or whatever you may want, medical assistants. But from a business standpoint, what would you advise to the average Joe out there considering seeking life outside of the hospital?
I would say for sure, get a experienced office manager should be your first hire, and the person that if they work, you just pay them as much money as they want to be paid and never let go of them. Because, when we say office manager in a private independent practice, what we're really saying is COO who kind of knows how to do everything and knows when billing shit looks wrong and knows when a bill hasn't been paid and knows how to fight with insurance companies and knows about take patient intake and knows when your forms are wrong and can probably help with your templates and like they're invaluable. So like if you're going to hire someone like clinical team aside, get an office manager who knows what they're doing and is good at it. And maybe they're looking for a change, right? They're burned out. They're this, they're that, they're the other thing. I think that's someone we always would recommend and is invaluable. They're going to know how to deal with your credentialing headaches with like all those different things. That's the only like hire I'm like, you gotta do that. From an outsource perspective, again, like it depends on a lot of things. I think finding the right EMR that works for you is really important. There's some truly terrible ones out there, obviously. But it's like real talk. It's like find the one you hate the least kind of a game. And go with that. And if the numbers work, the numbers work. But I just, and then one other big recommendation is always work with a credentialer or credentialing team that knows what they're doing, and if possible, local in your market or has worked in that market before. Because like when Blue Cross Blue Shield cancels your requests or loses them or doesn't respond to you or whatever, it's really nice when you have someone who can call Sally or John or email Bert in the office and say, "What's up? Why is this not getting done?" And they can like make it happen faster because, you hire a PA and you're like ready to go. And the biggest payer in your market's Blue Cross, and they won't credential him or her for 8 months. And you're like, well, good. You're on the hook for 100 grand and no revenue from that person. That's a problem. Um, so those are the biggest ones. Everything else, finding location's important. It ends up being a big expense and it takes a really long time. You can't get contracts until you have a location. But other than that, it's like the rest is detail. And those things are the things that provide the biggest leverage and move the needle the fastest.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think for context, just to put it out there, if you're in Houston, you're probably looking at somebody that's going to expect to make in between $100,000 and $150,000. That's going to be a really good, experienced office manager that would know the ins and outs of the business. If you're paying less than that, you're potentially going to look at shit work, honestly. This is one position where I think you have to pay well. If not, and maybe you're maybe a little bit concerned with that, then add a productivity bonus, right? You give them maybe a lower income and then say, listen, if you get me there and we close the year at $2 million in collections, I'm going to give you, a $20,000 bonus or something like that. You could build that to try to get the right person and align financially in the right way. Um, I'm personally huge on finding a good RCM person too. You didn't mention that, but I think unless the manager is amazing at that, but the problem is it's a lot of manual labor in chasing things down. So either you're going to get a group like yours that from the ground up can help with all that process of collection and AR and AP management as a kind of like a SaaS service like you're presenting yourself, or get somebody also, add that to your business, to your pro forma as the investments that you may have. And then I would add just on the clinical side, I think you start with an MA and a front desk. That's it. MA front desk, kick-ass manager, middle of the road RCM person, and maybe some good advisors.
How much would you pay your RCM lead?
That's probably going to be about a 30 an hour if it's somebody good. MA, depending on the market, but probably around 20 an hour. Front desk, anywhere from 16 to 18 an hour. That's again, this is Houston, Texas medical center rates, which are a little bit more competitive. I'm sure if you go to other places, it's going to be a little bit more, or a little bit less.
And if you outsource RCM, and yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And again, it depends on what your working capital is, your speed. I mean, a lot depends on credentialing too. Like a new practice RCM is very different than like an established practice RCM also. So if you're going to find someone or some group, ask them about how often they work with new practices, because like they're going to run into tons of credentialing issues and out of network problems and all this, and they need to either know how to solve them or know how to communicate with you. And I'd say like anytime you're outsourcing too, like be very clear, but like open to, because like you said, Miguel, like you guys work so well because you're like a team that's like close knit. You communicate with one another. It's a lot of people want to say like, oh, you guys do my RCM, cool, leave me out of it. And then like it doesn't go great, and they're like, what the hell? And it's like, well, you yell at us every time we ask you a question about a patient or something, or we can't find a chart. Like what are we supposed to do? We do our best, but like we're getting harangued over here. So like you got like any vendor too, like it should be a relationship that you're working together with them on. Don't expect to just say like, I'm just going to flip this over to these people and they're going to do the best job ever, and I never have to think about it. It's just not how it will ever work, especially in revenue cycle. But in terms of payment, like I don't know, industry average is still around like 6%. Startup practices, typically there'll be like a floor. They'll say like our minimum is 5,000 a month or something like that. There varying degrees in there, so it still gets expensive potentially. you get what you pay for. You find somebody who does it super cheap. Like, you're not like, they're gonna take 2 weeks to bill out. They're not gonna follow up. Like, it's just, kind of is what it is, and is unfortunate in a lot of ways. Um, and so yeah, just throw that in the pro forma, 6% to 7% of your net collections, and then that just becomes a number. That's another expense you just manage to.
Preston, if somebody out there is like, shit, I'd love to talk to Preston a little bit more. I'm considering doing something, or maybe I have a need and it sounds like you can fill a vacuum I have. How do they connect with you?
I'm always very findable on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to just search Preston Alexander on LinkedIn, or my email is just preston@forward/health, all spelled out, or you can go forward/health.com. You'll find me in one of those places. I'm usually pretty easy to get a hold of. I'll share real quick anecdote. We came up with /, one, because it's on the keyboard, so it's really easy to just like put into everything as a symbol. But also the premise was, you don't only have to be one thing. You can be a doctor/entrepreneur, doctor/business owner, nurse/whatever, clinician/anything you want to be. So like, that's our philosophy, is that, again, we're like, this isn't about staying in your lane. This is about improving healthcare and making it better. We believe it's through independence, and we want more physicians to see what they're capable of and like what's possible when they kind of embrace the / life.
You know what? As your brand consultant, free advice, I think try your best to go ahead and nail the domain fsh.com, which would be badass, because then you would be Preston@fsh.com.
I'll go check it out.
Check that out, because like, imagine when you're on shows like this, if somebody's driving, they're never gonna remember /health. Was it a / was it a word? fsh.com, man. Put in GoDaddy, put in a bid. We'll throw a little bit of money there, be part of the company. We're ready to go. Let's go, man.
Come on. Whoa, I'm in. Let's do this.
Let's do it. We'll invest a little bit in FSH.
Yeah, but I would say, like, we would love to have you back for sure to go deeper on some stuff. And also, we'll put your newsletter and your Substack in the show notes, which I enjoy.
Hell yeah.
And I think it's super for somebody that doesn't know anything like myself. I feel a little smarter when I read it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for having me. This is great. Super fun conversation. Happy to come back, talk anything, talk shop, talk macro stuff too, whatever, however it goes, however it flows.
Yeah, we didn't rent against insurance companies or big hospital systems, so we missed something.
I don't know.
Oh, we love doing that, so we can do that as many times as you want.
Yeah, we'll do a show about that. All right, guys.
Pura vida.